Hello, and uh, today I'll be going over a lot of the aircraft that I have made over the years that I've played this game. Um, I've certainly come a long ways. Um, these were some of my first main uh, flying machines. They don't perform that great, uh, but they work nonetheless. Um, so at like the very beginning of my work on aircraft, they usually required two people to be controlling it. One person would be controlling the pitch, and another person would probably be controlling the roll or the yaw. Um, these ones were the first ones to use 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 for the roll and pitch, which Um, I'm pretty sure that was around this time. I think was like the first year that I had the game. This one was like the first main one that I used. It uses a Springbox control system, uh, and this was I think before I had This uses 2 and 3 for roll, and just 4 is the pitch because the W makes it pitch downward, and that would be how you really got about with this, and then I changed it to use the 2, 3, 4, 5 control setup. Around that time, I would make this, which used um, pretty much the same control system. 2 and 3 is roll, and 4 is um, oh no, it was just the lift made it nose down. I mean, it flies not well, but it does. Um, I mean, if you can probably tell why the game is so laggy. I have a whole bunch of stuff everywhere. Uh, this was the first quadcopter design, um, where the 2 is roll left, 3 is roll right, 4 is nose down, and 5 is nose up, or pitch down and pitch up. Um, Holding down 2 and 3 gives it extra lift. So does 4 and 5. Um, Again, this uses a spring box for steering. Um, it's very hard to fly. It's very clumsy and not very precise. Um, I'm keeping a lot of these welded to the ground to reduce lag. This is the first iteration of it that I started using a lot. It uses um, the same controls, only number 6 controls, opens and closes a metal claw on the bottom. Um, it's fairly useful for the time. It was my main aircraft. I actually used this for, I think, 2 years, maybe. Um, I didn't like the fact that it used springs for steering. Um, because if it like hit a tree really hard, that could lock it up, or jam the steering mechanism, and it wouldn't work right anymore. Um, and it was just fairly slow and unstable. I tried to I basically like cut everything down to the frame and tried to revise it as much as I could with this newer design. This was when some of the newer parts were starting to be added. Um, Same control system, only this one has guns. Uh, Slightly different claw mechanism. It's controlled pretty much the same, only it's a bit different structurally. Um, and this is where they start to use thrusters for steering aid. It's still using a spring box primarily. There were two other versions. That was the base. This would be like the attack variant designed for attacking, and then this was the utility version of it, more oriented for lifting heavy things and such. Um, and that did fairly well. I revised it again with, I guess this would be the fourth version of it. Um, this is the first one to feature um, a rollover mechanism so that if it fell on its back, it could flip itself over. Uh, Still using a spring system. And again, there's a utility version and attack version, and then there is a bomber where instead of claws, it had a drop mechanism. Here, if I connect it there, you could, like place some cardboard here and then a bomb, and then the number 6 key, instead of opening and closing the claws, it would fire that, dropping the bomb. Um, there was another version of it, an experimental one that I'd never really used, um, that tried to cut down on some of the weight, uh, vaguely. I mean, not a whole lot, um, but just tried to improve general performance. And there was one where I added a lot more thrusters. And this one is the first one to use a secondary mode. So all of those, just the number 1 key will turn it on, giving a general lift, um, typically just enough so that it will slowly fall. This one, same thing, only another switch in the back would enable another set of thrusters, making it more maneuverable. Um, I mean, it wouldn't like handle as well. Like it'd be harder to perform fine maneuvers like hovering and such. But it made it much faster and much more agile. Um, then I took what I learned from the previous ones, um, completely dropped the spring mechanism, uh, remade the frame out of cardboard to make it even lighter, um, replaced the rotors with these flywheel-esque components. Um, when I first made the quadcopter, I think I stumbled upon a very good configuration. One thing that I didn't quite realize was that um, since the roll, the thrust provided from the roll was not perfectly. I mean, it was radially symmetric, but it wasn't symmetric vertically. So, like, if you wanted to roll left, it would provide an equal amount of thrust upwards on the right side as downwards on the left side. Uh, it didn't do that. It was always more thrust from underneath, and that made it so that if you hold down both the roll keys, they would oppose each other, and you'd get a net upwards uh, kind of boost and lift, which made it pretty easy to like raise it when you wanted to. You didn't have to like pitch up and then go forwards to gain altitude. Um, and the spinning rotors, because of the gyroscopic precession, it would resist the rotational some of the rotational forces. One example of this one that didn't follow that general layout. This was made around the same time as the other wooden one that was barely painted. This number one provides just enough lift to slowly raise it in the air, and the roll thrust is vertically symmetric. Um, and you can tell when I make it roll, even after letting off the keys, it still wants to continue rolling in any particular direction somewhat. And that's where the spinning of the rotors came into play, that I didn't quite realize this, that because of how they were counter-rotating, the gyroscopic effects resisted the rotation and counteracted each other. So if I told it to roll, it would roll in that direction, but then it would slow down faster than it otherwise would. And that's where I took advantage of this, making the rotors completely purposed to null the roll and pitch, whereas just there are other thrusters placed about to help it with vertical lift. And then the springs were removed for thrusters that were on bearings connected to the seat. Now they oppose each other vertically, so there is no net thrust. But when I start turn, they rotate in opposing directions, uh, or I guess you could say in the same direction, um, to make a yaw for the yaw translation. Um, One side effect of not using the spring system is that the springs would help to null the rotational effects of, um, just the other rotational effects, and it would make the yaw much more responsive. Um, this one, the yaw is not quite as responsive, and it doesn't resist any of the rotational effects on the yaw axis. So you do have to try to manually compensate for that with just being able to fly it well. This is, of course, the base model for this series. There's also the utility version, the attack version, and then there is the bomber. This one uses, I had to change a lot on this. There's 4 bombs. Um, one design feature that I didn't quite think about the side effects of this is that it's held by I guess the arming point. You can see it's connected here by these pipes. These sensors here are to check that the bomb is in place. There's a circuit that when I'm pretty sure it's the number 6. I haven't used this in a while. Will drop them one by one. Now they're disabled, so if I stand in front of this, nothing happens. But when it's dropped, by breaking that block, these sensors are no longer activated, and that arms it. It makes it so that if something gets in front of any sensors on the bomb, it will trigger spud guns inside of it to immediately set it off. The reason why it has a cardboard coating is to um, somewhat protect it against gunfire from the potato guns, so that if it gets hit, it won't immediately go off. Only if it gets hit twice in the same exact spot will it explode. Um, uh, I will demonstrate that later. This is a newer generation. Again, taking from what I've learned with that one, the other ones to make this. This one is using um, flywheel-like parts powered by one of the gas engines to help null the yaw axis. The the rotational resistor units that they're using sand instead of the concrete blocks. It's not as heavy, but it is less durable. And the reason for that is if it gets hit with an explosive, um, it's more likely that the entirety of the unit will get destroyed. Because if the center of the rotor is destroyed, but the weights still remain, then they'll go flying off, and then you'll have more objects in the world to worry about. Um, so that's the whole quadcopter series. There's also a bunch of different jet fighter-like craft. Um, Before I realized the kind of, I don't know, aircraft recipe that worked well, I tried making replacements for it because I wasn't happy with how many parts that it was made of. This also has a secondary mode, I'm pretty sure. Oh no, this is still welded to the ground. Um, this also has a cartridge in the back that you could put small pipes in, and it would load those into a piston launching mechanism. You would put them in here, and they would get pushed through here and then into that launching mechanism. Um, and again, a very early version of compact resistive modules, rotational resistors, as I refer to them. Um, Now, I haven't flown this in a while. Yeah, I think the update may have affected its weight. Um, yeah. Oh yeah, the proximity systems in it make it so that when you're close to the ground, the landing gear will deploy. Yeah, and the other functions of the ship will be not completely enabled. Um, for diminished maneuverability, which can help with landing precision. But when you're outside of its range, it will um, engage those other systems, making it more maneuverable. This is still pretty heavy, uh, and I don't prefer using this very much. Because yeah, it doesn't have that system that I've adopted, and the front will get stuck uh, really badly in that case. Um, this one, somewhat better. This was primarily designed to be a defense aircraft for large land vehicles. mobile air defense unit. I disabled the resistors here. No, I guess I can turn those on to demonstrate how it flies. Some of these here I wasn't planning on flying. Some of them don't work. But again, the 2 and 3 they don't provide any boost here. Number 6 is just the forward fire. The frame of it is primarily made of wood, and then it's using cardboard as just to cover up the non-important things. It has a W and S converter in it, so I can go backwards with this if I want to. And you'd typically try to land this either in a VTOL fashion or like a plane. There's this thing. I don't like this thing. I made this hoping to just make something that could fly, and something it is. Something terrible and not finished. It has pretty effective guns. It's really the only nice thing about it. But other than that, I never really used this. Well, I never really used it at all. I remember when I was bored, I would load this on top of a mountain and then fill it with bombs and then fly it off the mountain and then shoot at it. Then there was this kind of SR-71 X-Men like jet. Handles just the same as the other two. Again, the update that changed the weight of things has affected its performance. But yeah, it primarily just handles like a VTOL with a lot of forward thrust. And then there's what I just ran into, I guess my version of the Scorpion from the Avatar movie. Again, I need to disconnect this from the ground. Most of the lift is coming from the rotors. All of the lift is coming from the rotor modules, not really the rotor fans themselves. Steering is connected to, controlled by the A and D. They're in series. No, well, parallel, not series. Parallel in a linear arrangement to improve torque. Holding 2 and 3 does give the extra lift. I'd say it handles pretty well. It definitely feels heavy and slow, and I don't really prefer using this. I'll usually only use this for something if I want to like show it to a friend or I don't know, if I'm going to use this like a troop ship, you know, more immersive. There's another jet here that I won't fly. Handles very much the same as the others. Much more, the thrust balance is much better on it. There's this. I was tampering with VTOL systems that could automatically or manually switch between a vertical flight mode and a horizontal flight mode. Um, uh, Again, doesn't use springs to control its yaw. Then we have airships. Uh, this was not the first airship I ever made. I've deleted those a long time ago. If I were to describe it, they were very much like a surfboard with a gyroscope in the middle and a little walkway over top of the gyroscope. Um, that was before I realized that you could angle the sensors to get higher detail in the gyroscope. So my attempt at making a more sensitive gyroscope was to just make it bigger. And that's what this large thing is, and I'll come to that in a minute. Um, it was the most versatile airship for the time. It actually had a turret. Um, no W and S converters. It was just controlled by. I mean, it is controlled. Can't remember exactly. I do know that I have turrets that are controlled by the W and S. Uh, oh yeah, it's the numbers that go to electric motors on each bearing, and they just counteract each other. Um, it doesn't spin very fast since this was supposed to be like a long range air to ground. Like slowly tracking something. If you're pitched down and you get out, this edge here will push you outward. So the pitching it back to get out of it safely is kind of risky. And then around the gyroscope, well, ladder thing up, there's a platform here, kind of look around. Back here, stairs, get to thrusters, get to spinning rotational resistors. These are too small to be very effective. Um, Down here, like a ladder stairway here, there are, yeah, these would go to the guns. These would spin around and operate the guns, I think, in the front of the ship on the turret. WNS converter. I think the steering converter. Yeah, there's the steering converter. Um, and then back here, you could put bombs here, and then you could press this, and it would push them over the edge. This is a feature that was never really used, and at the time, the collisions were kind of finicky, and they might explode in the back. Um, Up this ramp, obviously there's the control seat. Number one, if I remember, turns it on. Number two does something else, and three and four and five do other things. I remember five goes to this, right? Yeah. I'm not going to fly it since the update, the update a long time ago changed stuff, and now it just kind of shoots straight up into the air instead of hovering nicely. Um, this this was way back before I made that. Um, Designed to be a much like a kind of like the helicarrier. There were supposed to be large rooms in the back where I could land the quadcopter um, inside it, uh, kind of like an aerial aircraft carrier. There's the main deck, which had the large gyroscope. This was before I started angling the sensors. There are multiple degrees of detection, so you could, like, the higher an angle it was at, the more it would thrust to correct itself. And then there are supposed to be displays here that would tell you your pitch and roll, much like the nav ball in Kerbal Space Program, or just your horizon line indicator in most aircraft. Um, and yeah, I just thought bigger was better, and now I know that that bigger isn't always better. So there's this giant, I don't know, kind of flywheel thing. Um, it doesn't spin very fast when I did wire it up. One interesting thing is that there were supposed to be multiple control points. Like at the very front, there's no like specific seat that you could control it from. There's this ugly hamster ball that was supposed to have buttons inside this dome that you could press to make it maneuver. Um, there was another one supposed to be at the bottom, one at the top. Uh, but again, those never really were added. Then there is this ship. First, like really armored airship. It does fly, not well, and it can just about barely stay level. It was never really finished. Um, this was the first, I think, to have two actually, well, supposed to have two actually functioning dual uh, cockpit like uh, control units, where if the main flight seat was destroyed, you could go to the other one. Um, it's using a revised version of the gyroscope in the other ship over there. Um, the back of it, steering converter, other things. This module was interesting. I can't remember quite. Oh yeah, you'd do this, and it was designed so that you could place like a cardboard block here and then a bomb that would detect it and then it'd immediately break it. So you could like spam drop bombs that way. Um, from a like structural strategic standpoint, I now realize it's a really bad idea to put the most like the second most important part of the ship in a giant glass case at the bottom of it. Kind of tells you exactly where to shoot. Um, this is the next airship up. This was made around the same time as the uh, newer generation of the quadcopters are being worked on, the ones that didn't have any springs in them. Multiple decks, two cardboard layers, well, 2 blocks thick. There's a light inside. There's the main gyroscope, um, much better design, much more sensitive. Has 2 modes. Turrets outside that can be controlled with the A and D and W and S, and then the number 1 key obviously turns the gun on. Um, they're primarily for long-range air-to-air or air-to-ground. Um, Same thing on the other side. In the lower deck, it's just the converters and such for the turret um, into space. The main deck, you have the relay here for the gyroscope. And now it's not that great idea to have it have to go through a whole lot of logic gates before it gets to the ship, because then you can have some delay, and if uh, and there's a good chance that the ship could enter a feedback loop trying to correct itself and overshooting. That's what these huge uh, rotational resistors are for. Um, Again, this is the biggest weak point of the ship. Um, if Since this isn't held very firmly, like guarded, if if either one of these supports is broken, the other part will go spinning around in circles and will like bang up against it and just make it not fly right at all. And it's usually like just breaking that one part will bring the whole ship down. Um, there's the main control seat, and now, uh, so under normal circumstances, the number one turns it on, and then the 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 act like the normal controls of all the other aircraft. But if you turn on number 6, yeah, I can fly this. I'm pretty sure, yeah, 6 goes into the airship flight mode, which will enable the gyroscope um, and keep it from rolling. And then the 2, 3, 4, and 5, if you have number 7 turned on, will go to that giant turret on the top of the ship. Um, there isn't a specific on and off. You can see here it's in a feedback loop, but um, there is no specific on and off for the turret. So there's like a delay, and then it kicks on. This switch, like when you have the ship level, and it's not in a feedback loop, you can press this and it will slowly tighten the view range of the sensors, which will keep the ship from drifting. Although if the ship is much more sensitive to disturbances, much easier to get into a feedback loop. So it's usually like, parking the ship in midair. It's not going to be moving around. You want it to stand still, probably for surveillance or something. Um, or like if you want, I don't know, make things easier for your side gunners. But if you have that disabled, and go over to number 7, you can see I can use this, and that turns on. And the recoil from it is high enough that it can give the ship trouble with the gyroscope, um, if you really want it to, and it does get jammed easily, which is a problem with that. Um, it's a pretty reliable ship, except for that main turret. There is no WS converter. It's just the W forwards. There's no backwards. Um, so like not that great for like closed space maneuvering, as I've proven here. Um, and then the larger airships that I've worked on, you've probably seen in the background. That big thing and this big thing, those are all shells. Um, I was working on this in um, a a modded world to make like a starship. It was going to have multiple layers, very thick armor metal, and it was going to use the anti-gravity parts um, and such for its maneuvering. But unfortunately, that world crashed, and all I have is this empty shell of it. Now, this giant boat, this does fly. Um, I also made a larger version of this that was, well, not larger, a more completed version of this. But again, that world kind of broke and I lost its save. Um, the upper deck was supposed to be themed somewhat like a Republic Star Destroyer, where the top could kind of open up and let light fighter craft out. This is the first one that was supposed to use dual gyroscopes. If one got misaligned, there could be another one you could switch to while you fixed the other one. Um, in the very, like, I obviously there's no real interior. Um, but up here is the main seat, and you can fly it, the same way as any other one with the 2, 3, 4, and 5. But you can also use the controls here, so you can actually stand here and fly the ship that way. And it's quite a lot of fun, albeit very hard. Um, it's a lot of fun to fly this. It's not every day that you see a giant pirate ship or cargo, like a giant cargo ship just floating in the air. Um, Not practical, hardly at all, but fun. Um, the yaw does have a lot of trouble. But I can talk about how large things move another time, and I've just landed on top of something else. Um, Way over there. Actually, let me get one of these. Um, oh no, I guess I should talk about this one. This ship, first ship to actually be have a lot of redundancy. Uh, Very heavily armored. As you can tell, this is pretty thick. I made this before the bomb damage system was accounted for, fixed. So a lot of testing and a lot of different hull iterations went into building this. Um, this one also has two gyroscopes. They're further apart. They're smaller. Um, in the front here, again, there's uh, redundant controls. Number one turns things on. Um, this is also going to have a similar flight system as to the other airship, where one of the buttons would switch it over from manual flight to gyroscope flight. Um, there are lines of logic gates around the corners of the exterior hull of the ship, and those are and they're placed so that if a large bomb hits it anywhere on the outside, some section of one of these will get broken, or I mean, there's a fair chance, and that will show up on this line as damage to the ship. If, say, like the middle light here started blinking, that would let me know that half of the middle section of the ship has been damaged. And then if the whole light lit up, that would let me know that the middle of the ship, or the middle section of the ship, has probably been completely destroyed or damaged enough to the point where things in there are no longer functioning. And that would be true for all of the other lights along it. So it'd give me an idea of how damaged different points on the ship are. Um, and obviously, knowing which ones of these are for which sections of the ship that contain the gyroscope, you can go and repair those if necessary. There is one of the systems in here checks to see that the gyroscopes are lined up with each other. If they're both outputting the same thing, then that lets it know that everything, well, orientationally, they're fine. However, if they become misaligned, then a warning siren for the front of the ship will and get enabled, alerting again the pilot to Oh, the gyroscopes are misaligned, and a light will come on. Um, Weapon systems, not finished. There was supposed to be an ASG cannon here, anti-ship gun. Um, Basically, what that is it takes advantage of how, like, the kinetic stacking of the potato guns on cardboard to launch bombs really, really, really fast. Having a whole bunch of potato guns clipped inside of each other. Um, this would be a door that could open, and then the cannon would be lowered, and then you could fire bombs out of it. Um, and on the top and sides there's supposed to be turrets. There's like a little meeting room here, but further in the back is supposed to be just like a maintenance room. Outside the ship, oh, these doors, these wedges are meant to lock in place particularly well so that even if the piston on the door breaks, you can't get this out. The only way you can get the door out is by lifting it vertically. It shouldn't fall out very easily from side to side stresses. Uh, I mean, it's not finished. You can tell that these aren't covered up, and there's some giant measuring stick here labeling the different sections of the ship. Um, and I might return uh, to work on this somewhat. Then there's this this large ship, again supposed to be like an aerial, like fleet carrier ship. Um, like I have a version of this that has a large like bay door. I might show that, but like there is enough room to land, I think, a few quadcopters in here. Um, I'm working on newer aircraft that have really low part count. Um, Up here, here's the control deck tower. The main seat is inset slightly because when you get out of the seat, you pop out directly on top of it. And in a lot of like um, my other aircraft, if the seat is covered up, you'll usually pop. It'll usually like you'll pop out of the glass, or you'll have to crouch when you get out, or it'll be like a hatch that opens up. Um, and then there's these uh, similar flight system to the jets, only it only engages when you're off the ground and the forward thrust is constant. So it's really just like a harder to fly version of the jets. Um, I didn't show this is probably like 85, maybe 90% of all the aircraft that I've ever made. I haven't shown any of my helicopters or aircraft that I've used with the mods. Um, but this being pretty much all of it, that is my uh, aerial, all of my aircraft.